what I plan to cover is I can talk to you about different elements within supply chain. So if you look at supply chain, what are the key elements within supply chain, and within that, where exactly are we using analytics, and what is the business impact it's causing for different organizations. I will also touch upon some of the tools and technologies that are already prevalent in supply chain, and then of course give you like a quick sense on the future outlook from my point of view, and some expectations from analytics professionals that I've seen so far. So firstly, I mean, to set the context, in supply chain, analytics in supply chain is not something new. So it's always been there over the last couple of decades, in fact. And I mean, the only difference has been that over the last 3-4 years, it has become more in-depth and has evolved in nature. So while previously analytics was done in different silos, so within, say, for example, in manufacturing, they would have a material resource management system with, at the floor level or the factory level, there would be some analytics happening in terms of production scheduling, whereas suddenly in the warehousing, there would be another system for warehousing management system where there would be different types of warehousing or transport related data that would be collected, and some sort of analytics would be happening there. And then one would be at a center level for managing your demand and planning. So it's always been done, but it's always been done in very silos and very like specific manner. But now, like in terms of maturity, as you would have seen across different sources, so like due to decrease in cloud storage prices, faster processing, then you've got so many easy to use and self-service analytics tools now. A lot of enterprise resource planning systems, ERP systems, have come up with different modules where you could run certain descriptive analytics. So all that has in fact like increased the role the analytics plays, and it has kind of made it more evolved and more focused, more in depth, so you can take more decisions by leveraging analytics within supply chain. And it has become even more important because analytics is used as a competitive advantage as a result of most of the supply chains have become very global in nature. There's always economic uncertainty. There are a lot of scrutiny and a lot of regulations that comes into the picture. And then, of course, the product life cycles that you have become very dynamic. So if you can't get a product to your customers on time, then the customer might go and buy something else. So that's the whole thing. So in summary, basically, there are like 4-5 key areas that analytics is solving in supply chain. One is your somebody not on mute? Better now. Sorry about that. So one is, of course, end-to-end supply chain visibility. Then second is like margin improvements, or how you can like model your supply chain cost across the value chain and figure out areas of opportunity where cost could be cut and margins can be improved. Better efficiency in terms of assets and productivity, managing your risk, and then getting the overall picture on the product costing, and finally demand planning and supply planning management, which is basically forecasting. So these are the some elements where analytics is being used. As you can see, so if you look at supply chain, so supply chain is made up of basically 5 elements. So on the top, as you can see, so the first element is when you're designing a particular product, how you want to develop that product or a service or a good. Second is planning. So in terms of planning, like what demand do you expect the product is going to have. Then sourcing. So sourcing involves sourcing the right raw materials through the right suppliers, to the right channels, and on time. And then making. So making is actually manufacturing that particular product that you've designed, etc. And then finally delivering it to the customer. So that's broadly the 5 elements within supply chain. So if you look at the role of analytics, the role of analytics within supply chain is firstly around data management. So when I talk about data management, it's basically acquiring the right data. So that's definitely in the purview of analytics. So you've got multiple systems, internal systems, ERP system, etc. How do you extract the right information that you need, right? And nowadays, like due to a lot of these other new unstructured sources of data like Internet of Things, sensor sources, etc. So the acquisition process has even become more vast. So you've got a lot of new data streams that you need to extract from different sources. Second is within data management is customized automation. So when I say automation, I mean that how can you leverage machine learning algorithms, artificial intelligence, or any other basic VBA codes or anything to basically merge different data sources together and standardize information. So that's again a very important step. Thirdly, advanced modeling visualization. So whatever database that you've built, whether it's hosted in a data warehouse or data lake, how do you put it into the right business intelligence platform? How do you visualize it? And how do you have the right visualizations to tell the storyline that you want to say? And then in the back end, any modeling activity that you need to inbuild, whether it's modeling basic business rules or whether it's building certain predictive models or optimization techniques, whatever it is. So that's very important. And finally, the commercialization angle. So commercialization angle is something quite recent. So over the last couple of years, more organizations or more companies would want analytics to be delivered as a platform or as a solution through a proper user interface, so that it could run. It could be run by different users within it who could be upskilled to use it, as compared to always finding the technical folks to do it. So there's a huge trend towards do-it-yourself type of analytics solutions or self-service analytics. So, and the same has been true what I've seen in supply chain as well. A lot of organizations would want ultimately to provide that particular solution that you've developed and transfer it back to the organization so that their users can be upskilled to work on it. And if they need any technical support, they can always reach out. So that's what the role analytics plays across supply chain. Then if you look at impact, so impact is of course like in terms of faster transactions, you'll get more visibility across the supply chain. You've got better data and fact-based decision making that you can do from different sources. And then of course like cutting costs that you can have. Sorry, one more thing that I forgot here is like what is enabling all these changes across the supply chain is, of course, something we talked about, and you would know it really well, is cloud computing. So the adoption of cloud computing has improved a lot, especially in supply chain domain. And then, of course, like now you've got a lot of these technologies and tools that are available that companies it's easy for them to implement these solutions, and they are embracing what we call the digital culture within organizations. So if you look at the first element, so first element is basically developing a product. So this is mainly around in the first phase of product design and development. So how do you manage the overall life cycle of a product? Here, basically, the kind of projects or kind of work that analytics does is firstly around your product costing analysis. So basically understanding the different costs associated with manufacturing that product and running some sort of analytics in terms of what if you change a different type of grade. So if you're using a plastic with A grade, and if you change it to B grade, then how will it impact your product cost? So those kind of simulation and optimization type of techniques. Then the second is bill of material variance analysis. So this is basically a lot of manufacturing companies have huge amounts of bill of material data, and they've got like very targeted systems where this information is held. So to give you an example, we recently did a project for a rail coach manufacturing company, which had like factories in 4 different geographies. So as a part of the exercise for them was to consolidate the bill of materials that they had. So like develop like a standardized and a big database for their bill of materials. Then again, like, so that's like first step. But since the data was held across different regions, so the unit measurements were different. All those currency conversions were different. So it was a challenge to first consolidate that bill of materials, and then of course they wanted for that to build certain business rules. So if you business rules based on which if they want to the quote the product price to somebody, they'll know exactly how they can quote it based on certain variances. So you have to model like about 5-6 different types of variances into the model to understand like what will drive the price at a global level for their particular product that they're manufacturing. Value engineering is similarly is very similar to bill of material and product costing analysis. Again, looking at what is the cheapest or the most cost-effective way or a design to manufacture that particular product. And sustainability, suddenly like there's a lot of analytics and sustainability are suddenly being popular due to carbon footprints, and you can do a lot of energy analytics due to smart meters, etc. So a lot of that type of data is available now, so you can accordingly model your energy efficiencies, etc. Into this. So ultimately, within this, analytics is more about how do you minimize product complexities, how do you get better visibility into your product data, cost, and then finally use it to design a better product or like optimize your product portfolio in order to have a good and good margins on your portfolio in general. Moving on. So the second step is basically planning. So again, so this is a very important step, and supply analytics in this particular area has been existent for quite some time now, and there are a lot of self-service and very powerful tools available, which does most of the analytics part. So there are tools such as Kinaxis or like ON partners, etc., which does manage this particular element very well within organization. So basically, this deals with managing or forecasting your demand so that you always have like existing inventory and the right production levels in order to fulfill that demand. So hence, like it's a very important step in supply chain. So within that, the most important is demand planning. So demand planning is basically forecasting your demand, and it's very prevalent. And as I said, there are a lot of self-service tools available here, but still, like it's an important thing because you need to have the right accuracy levels, the right predictive model here, and you need to take the right inputs in terms of data, and of course, like unstructured data from suppliers, etc., to forecast the demand better. Second, inventory analytics and optimization. So how do you manage your or reduce your inventory levels so that you have minimum working capital cost? So those kind of analytics is done. Replenishment strategy deals with reducing the lead time and replenishment time to get your particular product to the customer. So how do you plan that activity? Where exactly are you? Where exactly do you see an opportunity where it's taking more time, less time, etc., and how you going to minimize it? Supply chain inventory flow reporting is basically end-to-end supply chain visibility. So to give you visibility in terms of what is being manufactured, what goods are in transit, what inventory are you holding, what inventory is pending with suppliers, distributors, wholesalers, etc. All that end-to-end visibility can be modeled really well by using analytics. Lastly, SKU rationalization. SKU rationalization is basically, again, reducing your product portfolio to only keep SKUs which have like higher margins or higher turnover as compared to, and getting rid of low margin SKUs that you do not need. So these are some of the key analytics projects type in this element. And again, like in terms of impact, it's about reducing lead time to ensure your product reaches the customer at the right time, avoiding overproduction, efficiency in terms of your asset efficiency. So, and then finally managing that demand and supply risk that most organizations face. So sourcing. So this is more about. So of course you've developed a product, you've planned the demand, etc. Now it's about sourcing the right raw material, sourcing the right services, and managing those supplier relationships. So this element deals with that. So within this, there are three key areas I would say where analytics is very prominent. So one is what we call spend analytics. So here again, like it's a very common area, and one of the first steps that any company in procurement or a procurement function would do is to understand where exactly is that organization spending its money on. So what categories are they spending? What suppliers are they using? And then doing some sort of analytics to understand whether there are some rationalization opportunities. So are they using uh, a lot of suppliers for same type of commodity, or can they uh, or they are they using a lot of categories? They have multiple contracts for a lot of commodities with one supplier. So how they can leverage that to derive economies of scale. So those are some of the analytics that you could do by analyzing the spend data. Second is more about supplier risk management and performance reporting. Again, for a lot of companies have huge amount of supplier information, and within those supplier information they maintain a lot of performance indicators and SLAs. So one of the ways companies use analytics is to report on those SLAs, like which supplier is performing better, which is not performing as per par, etc. And then of course the other element is on risk management. So due to economic uncertainties, I mean, it's very important to predict the risk of a supplier going bust or supplier not meeting the order that you've placed. So there are a lot of supply risk management solutions and monitoring solutions that that are available in the marketplace, and a lot of companies use it. So these solutions typically are based on a lot of other factors. So what they typically do is they aggregate news from different sources, structured, unstructured data, your spend data, etc. And then through text analytics, they use certain sentiment analysis to segment the news into positive and negative. And then based on certain business rules that have been inbuilt, they can come up with a rating on the supplier, whether a rating on the basis of financial risk or any supply chain related risk. And through that, you can make out how will how will the risk impact your supply chain, and you can take the relevant mitigation action basically by using that analytics. Then thirdly, commodity and raw material forecasting. So basically, a lot of direct materials such as plastics or I mean any wheat or anything, these commodities that companies procure. So they have in-house teams, so they would use analytics to predict the price of these commodities so that they can accordingly hedge against the increase in price. It's again a very common practice. Should cost modeling. So it's again like when you're negotiating with a supplier, you want to understand what cost base the supplier has. So and accordingly, like what will happen if you change a particular type of grade into something else, and then you can model those costs accordingly. RFI, RFQ optimization. So again, like this again is part of a lot of e-sourcing tools that are available in the market. So here again, I mean, once you've received a lot of quotation from different suppliers, then using certain constraints in terms of maximizing your savings, what is the right mix of suppliers should you award that contract to? So those kind of optimization can be done. And finally, contract and invoice analytics. So it's basically around you've got your purchase order data that you've sent to your supplier, then you've got your invoices from the supplier, then analyzing the two to understand if there have been any fraud. Is the supplier charging you more than what you've ordered, or like what is the difference in prices that you've agreed versus what the supplier has invoiced? So all those type of analytics can be performed uh, in this particular area. So yeah, finally, like in terms of business impact, it's you're managing a supplier risk, you're driving savings. So in terms of your negotiation with suppliers, or like basic savings that you can derive if a supplier is cheating on you, and visibility on the spends on your spend, and then finally compliance and supplier reporting, which again is quite a Herculean task if you're dealing with multiple suppliers across geographies. So this again, so this element deals more with manufacturing of that product. So of course you've sourced everything. Then how do you ensure that you're manufacturing this product in adequate supply, and at the same time you're maintaining the replenishment time that has been set for you. So it's about a production scheduling. So this again is quite an old tactic, and a lot of manufacturing companies have been using this analytics in this area for a long time. Then second is supply allocation. So where do you want the supply to be allocated uh, based on the demand you're predicting? Then within that, uh, what what is the demand you're requesting a tier one, tier two supplier to fulfill? All those things can be done through this predictive maintenance. So this is something new that has come up. So a lot of machines or robots that you use in production or manufacturing, they generate a lot of data. So how can you use that data to predict whether there'll be a downtime soon, or whether those machinery would require certain amount of maintenance activity or not? And then sustainability is something very similar to what we discussed. So using energy data to figure out whether in terms of are you being smart in terms of energy efficiency, or where exactly are you spending, those kind of things. So ultimately, I mean, this analytics is more about your efficiency in terms of your asset efficiency. You need to reduce your downtime in terms of production, avoid overproduction. You need to maintain that level, and then ensure that replenishment and lead times are managed and it's at the right level and not beyond that. So lastly, so this step is more about optimizing your logistics and transportation and distribution costs. It's basically ensuring that the goods that you manufacture get to your distributors, wholesalers, clients, etc., in time and at the right price. So within that, one of the very common uh, project type is network and route optimization. So basically, it deals with what route should you take to deliver a particular good or a commodity, or like what kind of type of transportation mode or channel you can use to do it at a cost advantage. So this again is a very popular form of analytics, and there are a lot of tools that perform this activity. So there's a tool called LlamaSoft, which is quite prevalent in the marketplace, and a lot of companies use it to model this. Second is what we call cost to serve modeling. Is basically you're modeling all the cost associated with delivering a product right from its manufacturing phase to the way it's delivered. So all the associated costs, so you model it, and then figuring out using that analytics and visualization, you figure out where do you see, where can you identify opportunities to save. So that's what cost to serve modeling is. Second is again warehousing shipment allocation. So ensuring that warehouses that you maintain are like efficient in terms of you're putting the right products, right goods there, and utilizing them as compared to underutilization. Aftermarket predictive maintenance. So it's again like the goods that you've manufactured. Can you track like using those sensor data or something else? Can you track if they would need some maintenance support in the near term? So this again is something new which has suddenly started, and companies are like building various proof of concepts and MVPs around this area, like how to do this. So ultimately, like what analytics is solving here is how can you reduce your transportation cost, your asset efficiency is maintained, of course, at the same time reduce lead time and replenishment time, and overall like gives the required visibility to the user. So that's broadly what I wanted to cover in terms of supply chain. So I mean, these are the 5 elements, and through the examples that I quoted, those are some of the project types or solution types within analytics that companies use, and then the quick snapshot on the business impact it has on organizations. Moving on. So since I talked about a lot of different project types, in this particular slide that I have, I want to talk a bit about various tools and solutions that are prevalent within supply chain. So if you look at, I think the slide is still loading, so I can see, I mean, you guys are not able to see it yet. Yeah. Okay, so basically, in terms of solutions, so of course, like in terms of, I mean, you would know in terms of the ecosystem that we have of analytic tools, so it has evolved a lot, like huge amount of a lot of tools and technologies that are available. And there is a strong growing trend towards off-the-shelf and self-service analytic solutions as compared to like customized analytic solutions or customized or like one-time project activity that used to happen. So now organizations want a tangible solution which could be used over and over again, especially in supply chain where it's very dynamic in terms of solutions. So you want to plan your inventory on a regular basis, you want to do it daily, monthly, weekly, and most of the problems in supply chain, at least based on my experience, at least 60 to 70% of the issues can be solved by simple analytics or simple descriptive analytics, and hence there is a strong push and strong demand for those type of self-service analytic solutions, especially in supply chain. So the first type of tools are like those tools which are very supply chain focused. So these are like off-the-shelf tools which already have a very good adoption. And what these tools typically do is they of course provide visibility into the data, but they also do certain complex analytics as well. So if you look at LlamaSoft, so LlamaSoft can model your network, your transportation, etc., and already has inbuilt optimization models to give you insights on the right route or right network to follow while managing the delivery of your goods and services. Similarly, JDA is another source, another tool within supply chain that does this, gives you visibility and links your warehousing management systems to your transport management systems, and then of course links it back to your materials or your inventory or your planning systems to give you that visibility. Kinaxis is a very powerful tool which basically does the entire supply chain. It's an end-to-end software that right from planning to all the way to delivery, it can provide you entire visibility, and at the same time it does demand planning on a real-time basis, and then accordingly manage the supply at the back end, giving orders to suppliers on tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers in terms of what quantities are expected out of them based on the demand it's projecting. So it's all real time and quite a powerful tool that companies have started to adopt. Other tools such as Spend 360, again, like a spend analytics tool. Similarly, they're like sort of tools like these. Coupa, Ariba. So Coupa and Ariba are predominantly e-sourcing tools, as they call it. However, they also do some form of analytics. So whether it's optimizing your suppliers that you're taking, or it's optimizing like which supplier to choose or what sourcing model to take, all those things. So a lot of these particular tools would ideally be descriptive in nature, but also perform some sort of complex modeling or analytic solution can be offered using them. Then the second could be most like integrated solution that you probably use to solve different problems. So it could be Excel plus Access, very simple solution, or SAP plus HANA solution using Microsoft SQL Server, and then like at the back end, and then visualizing that activity with a Tableau dashboard or MicroStrategy. So these are again like those type of solutions that you want to do it for a point-based solution. So a particular user in supply chain would want to view a very specific thing. So for example, in procurement, if you would want a category manager in travel would just want inputs on travel category, like what is the spend on travel, where exactly are they spending their money on, who are the suppliers. So those kind of specific solutions can be created based on these integrated technologies uh, for those type of users. Uh, then on the right-hand side is all those generic analytics tools that I mean, I'm sure many of you would be aware of it, SPSS, SAS, etc. It's just that depending on the business issue or the problem, I mean, you can use a mix of these tools or just one of those tools, depending on what the issue is. And then at the bottom, you can see a lot of enterprise or ERP systems, which also have certain modules within supply chain and procurement that can at least provide some descriptive analytics to users. So that's what the overall tools and solution ecosystem looks like. So it's quite a mixed bag, and usually, like based on the business issue or problem, you kind of like zero it down to a couple of solutions or tools that you want to use to solve that particular problem. So that's how it works basically. Moving on, so this is more about. I wanted to just give you a sense on like how going forward analytics would be the backbone of this growing trend on digitalization. I'm sure many of you would have heard about this term digitalization. So if not, so uh, it's basically you've got a lot of physical assets which have now started to generate information, right? Digital information, and that's what digitalization trend is about. Like how do you harness that particular data that gets created across these physical assets? So if you look at Internet of Things, so with Internet of Things, uh, sensors, wearable technologies, it's it's your physical assets or machines that are like producing certain amount of data. Similarly, blockchain, which is basically, again, it's in the news. It's about creating those digital ledgers, augmented reality, autonomous vehicles, 3D printing. All these are new technologies uh, which would be generating a lot of digital data. And the analytics opportunity here is basically how do you safely store the data that you're getting from these sources? How do you extract the right data set? How do you dynamically analyze it and sometimes in real time basis and then accordingly drive the right insights and decisions? So it's getting that understanding using deep learning, artificial intelligence, machine learning algorithms, natural language processing. So IBM Watson is a perfect example of that. So that's what the future looks like. So how do you use analytics to do this? And like that's a challenge that that's going to be there faced by many people who want to get into analytics. And it's a big opportunity because I mean all these technologies uh, are quite significant in nature, and the adoption of these would continue to grow. Things like 3D printing, which have already started, autonomous vehicles, you would have heard like a lot of companies are testing those. Robotics are already used in manufacturing. So it's a huge potential. So moving on, so this is more like a last segment of the webinar, where basically uh, I just wanted to like highlight some of the expectations from analytics professionals based on my experience. So firstly, like based, it's very important to understand the business issue first and foremost. So before jumping on to the technicalities, it's very important to understand what the business issue is, whether the client wants to uh, have that analytics solution to create visibility, whether they want to actually figure out ways to optimize cost, whether they want it to improve their margins. So to understand that business issue is very important. Second, visualizing to keep it simple and easy to understand. Most people do not understand heavy jargons or technicalities. So So you need to have the creative bent of mind to visualize the problem in front of the client or in front of the solution for the solution. So like how do you visualize it and make it simple to understand and communicate. Thirdly, I mean, it's very easy to get internal data sources when you're building a analytics model or a solution. However, you should always look out for some additional sources or some third-party data that you can definitely use and add that extra layer and do some meaningful analysis. So it's very important to have that open, uh, have that open thought process to ensure that you've looked at different sources as well and not just concentrated on the data that you have it in hand. Leverage automation in AI. So basically here it's more about, since the data that you're getting in terms of amounts, it's going to be significant, getting significant daily. So how can you leverage automation and analytics and AI to uh, basically standardize it in a better manner, transform the data set so that it's analytics ready. So that's like a challenge and the key expectation. Then growing need for Stack developers and data warehousing, data lake creation. So since I talked about, in terms of data management, so one of the first steps is to extract the right data set and then ensure the data is efficiently stored in the right format so that you could perform analytics on it. So for that, there is like a huge expectation that analytics professionals should get some idea on like how do you manage those data, how do you build a data lake out of different sources, data warehouses, etc. So there's like a huge demand for people with those type of skill sets and technical knowledge on doing those kind of activities. Apart from just going ahead and like building the analytics model with its predictive techniques or optimization. So this is the first step. This is quite important for people to know. Then finally, like leveraging already existing solutions and tools that are already in the market as compared to reinventing the wheel. So so this helps you to like ensure that you've got the right technology, you're using the right tool, and not like reinvent the wheel and take a lot of time to develop something which could have been done quickly. So these are some of the expectations and some of the things based on my knowledge that I wanted to highlight. So I think that's what I wanted to cover broadly, and we can open it to any questions that you guys have, and I can start answering those from Daisy. So it dwells into contract and invoice analytics. So again, like contract and invoice analytics, so it's again quite a vast field, and there are again a lot of self-service tools, but at the same time, a lot of these things can be done in a customized manner. So one of them, so if you look at contract analysis, so basically some of the common things that you want to look at in contract analysis is to find out how has your supplier performed versus what you had in the contract. So whether it's looking at payment terms. So whether in terms of payment terms, are you paying those suppliers within 60 days if that's what's written in the contract, or are you taking more than 60 days, or you're paying them in like 10 days when as per the contract you should be paying them in 60 days. That gives you working capital financing sort of opportunities. So that's like one of the key analysis that you could do using contract data. Second is again invoice analytics, which is mostly around looking at purchase orders, looking at invoices, and figuring out where exactly is there any discrepancies in terms of prices or quantity, etc., and then figuring out uh, and then highlighting those and flagging those or highlighting those to the right people. And you can detect a lot of fraudulent activities as well. So where, for example, you must have agreed on something to pay a supplier, or depending on the purchase order, however, that supplier would have invoiced you more than what was requested, and then the procurement department would have just accepted that invoice and paid the supplier already. So you can detect all those fraudulent type of transactions as well. by leveraging analytics. Then I've got this question uh, from Adarsh on which companies hire SCM analytics. So basically, they are like mainly, I would say, three types of companies that will hire uh, people with supply chain analytics experience. So one are your regular organizations or corporate, so companies, which could be in healthcare. It could be so healthcare. I know because healthcare is quite mature in terms of supply chain. So they have huge supply chain departments and center of excellence where they would have like demand planners, forecasters. Then similarly, they would have people managing inventory, etc. So those would be some of the companies, big conglomerates or companies with complex supply chains, which are into manufacturing or which are into any form of any similar activities of producing actual goods and services and dealing with multiple suppliers who would have those supply chain uh, divisions or functions. So they would probably hire that supply chain analytics professionals. Then a lot of professional services companies. So if you look at all the consulting firms or the analytics firms, so these are the second type of companies that would hire this type of talent because they would be dealing with similar organizations and solving these supply chain problems for them. So that those are the companies. Like it could be all the big fours, all the boutique consulting firms, and there are a lot of these supply chain focused consulting firms as well. And lastly, it would be those analytics companies that also offer supply chain analytics. So companies such as the Smart Cube or EvalueServe or I don't know about Mu Sigma, but such companies like Absolute Data, whoever focuses on supply chain analytics would be open to hiring these folks. Uh, then I got a question from Saravanan about how can we identify the tools. So I'm not really sure what you mean by it. So if you can just elaborate, I can answer it better. Because based many of these tools, I mean, you can find a lot of these details on these tools either in Gartner reports, because Gartner publishes a supply chain management report that talks about these tools and across different things. Similarly, there are like a lot of other sources that talk about these tools. So I mean, it's about checking the web, I think, to figure out what is available, what is not available. Then I got a question from Daita on data visualization in data analytics. How important is data visualization in data analytics? So again, so like I think visualization is very important. I think because without visualization, it's very difficult to communicate your thought process, communicating what the supply chain problem is, and uh, and just talk sense. So I think visualization is very important, and that's like the first step. So once you built a database uh, based on your as this data that is being held across systems, and the second step is visualizing that data to understand patterns or understand any areas of improvement, performance, etc. That can only you can only tell that story through visualization. You can't really tell it by just looking at columns of data. So visualization, I think, is very important in analytics, and it's like I would say a core element. Then there was a question from Venkat Raman on prerequisite for this analytics. So I think there is the prerequisite is in terms of if you know the technicalities in analytics, that's fine. So that's like almost 60 to 70% of your job is done. So 30-40% comes from understanding the business issues. And the business issue is something that you can just read about the process, get that understanding from different places, read it on the internet to understand. So I think once you've got a good understanding of supply chain, or like you understand the business issue, then I think the only thing stopping you is your technical knowledge. So I don't think so. There is like very important prerequisite to get into supply chain analytics. For the PPT and PDF, I mean, it's PDF can be shared, so I think I'll check with uh, Saurabh on that, and I'll get back to you later on this. There is a question from Ashish on the last slide. You have mentioned about third-party data sources. So I'm not really sure. So Ashish, can you just complete your question, because I think it's incomplete. Then the question, moving on, question from Hari Andan about, he has left, so I think we can just ignore that question. So this question is from Paras about, can you provide more details and use cases on the application of analytics leveraging IoT? So I think based on my knowledge so far, so this is quite a new area. So there are certain proof of concepts and some, I would say, some solutions that some companies have used in the past, especially in the manufacturing field. But again, like this, in terms of usability, it's still at a nascent stage, and I think in the coming years we will find more about this, like how companies can use IoT. So typically, in terms of application, it's basically used. For example, I read about this company, in this insurance company in the US, that basically was did a pilot study on using your Fitbit data or your wearable data to uh, understand or calculate premium. So basically, individual premiums, if you're healthy or like you're active, you're exercising a lot, then accordingly your premium can be decided. Similarly, like telematics is another area which basically through telematics you can get understanding of how a particular driver is driving his or her car or truck or whatever it is, and then based on that you could set car insurance premium based on driving behavior, habits, etc. And similarly, you can like accordingly manage the fuel cost, etc. So all those things are some of the examples of IoT, and many of these are like already being proven. So it's just that adoption has not yet started. Similarly, in manufacturing robotics, I mean, it's about understanding when do you think a machine would need maintenance or repair. So those kind of things are some of the use cases that you can find on IoT. It also raises a question about sensor data. So because many of these data, in terms of sources, it's quite different. So one of the challenges is that A, how do you acquire the data, and B, how do you transform that data to make some sense out of it in terms of whether it's measurement of unit or whatever it is. So that's also some of the challenges that you can face when you're looking at these type of new data sources. Uh, Then I think there's a question from Venkat Ramana on means technology is required for this. Again, like if you can complete the question, I can take it. Uh, there's a question from Ajay Giri on, I'm currently working as SaaS programmer and wanted to get to supply chain analytics. Uh, so again, like I mean, the only advice I can give to you is get some basic understanding of the supply chain domain, and then I think just start applying to any of these professional services firms to start with, because a lot of these organizations, if you want to get into directly supply chain domain, they would require some past experience. But like some professional services or consulting firms would be the right platform, because even if you've got these technical skills, they would be willing to hire you and like invest in developing those skills which are not there in terms of supply chain. And then when you're working with them for like a couple of years, you get that understanding, and then you can apply to a supply chain management function in a bigger organization. Basically, coming back to the question from Ashish about third-party sources. So third-party data sources, when I say third-party data sources, it means things like, so for example, for getting financial information on suppliers, you can use things like companies house documents that publishes in the UK that publishes financials on companies. Similarly, you've got Thomson One that publishes financials on companies, Bloomberg, etc. So those are some of the third-party sources. Similarly, like if you're forecasting prices of say plastics, then getting that historical data on plastics, which could be coming from third-party sources. So getting those insights from those data sources, whether it's industry data sources or aggregators. That's what I meant by third-party sources. Then there's a question from Saravan on how can we identify the tools and techniques for the industry or for specific domain. This is more like a function of different things. So firstly, it's about looking at the amount of data that the amount of data that you would end up handling, the amount of business rules that need to be modeled, how much data transformation needs to be done, right? What kind of analytics do you need to run? Is it simple? Is it advanced? Then in terms of visualization, so how do the visualization, what kind of visualization needs to be built on it, whether it's highly customizable or it's something standard that you can use a Tableau to do it, or you might want to use R Shiny because you're doing your analytics modeling in R. So all those questions help you answer the right toolkit or the right solution. And then finally, it's also uh, how do you want to end up using that, whether you want to hand that solution over to a client. So if that is the case, then you need to judge what the client knows or does not know, or what will be simple for the client. So all these uh, questions help you understand like what different tools to use. Then there's a question from Ajit on video and spatial analytics. So here I've got like in fact two very good examples and use cases that I've come across. So one is video analytics. In fact, like three. In fact, I'll talk about three examples because they are quite interesting. So one is like a standard video analytics in retail stores to ensure that there are no theft or shrink management to control shrink management and employee productivity. So those are like some of the very common examples of video analytics that there are like lots of examples and proof of concepts on that. The second thing that I was reading about was that how the security agencies are using video analytics. So basically, most of your surveillance data that you have across cities, right? So there is a company. I won't name the company, and I won't know name the organization, but they're doing like a test pilot to understand like from so if in a tube station or in a metro or in a bus station, there are like multiple people, so based on the faces they are making or the face pattern or whatever they are looking at, their body language to predict like how likely is that person uh, going to do some criminal activity. So whether it's terrorism or whether that person is going to pickpocket somebody. So they're working on a proof of concept by using those surveillance data or video data to like figure out any trends or any patterns that they can understand so that they can detect such cases before it can happen. So I mean that's like a very cool example that companies are working on using video and spatial analytics. Second is on spatial analytics is a lot of hedge funds use this data. Like there was a case study recently, like how a hedge fund used this data to predict how much sales Walmart is going to have based on imagery, satellite images based on the number of cars parked in Walmart across the US. So, I mean, these are like some of the cases that I've heard about for these type of examples. Then there's a question from Sanjeev on the groundwork to switch from software to data analytics. Well, I think that's like a very common question, and I mean many of I've heard this a lot. But to me, I think what my advice would be to just play by your strength. So, for example, since you are from a software background, then the kind of experience you would have would be very strong on programming, etc. So I would suggest just play on those strengths of learning new analytics programming, whether it's R, whether it's Python, etc., and then figuring out two types of stuff that you can probably will be easy for you uh, to transition to. So one is of course data management element. So again, like there is a huge demand for people who can manage different data sources, integrate those data sources. So that involves a lot of programming skills. So again, that's a very good example that you could do. The second is more about working on the user interface side of things. So it's basically uh, like how do you design the user interface, because a lot of user interface is going to be more portal or web-based portal driven. So if you've got some experience on Java and those kind of programming language, then again that's an important, because analytics would be a backend activity. So it will be an enabler, but like in terms of UI, that needs to be very jazzy and may not always be a Tableau or a MicroStrategy. It needs to be a web-based portal or something like that. So that's again like an area where like it's easy for software guys to transition into. So there's a question from Christopher and Siddhartha on what are the functional skills expected from a supply chain data analyst. So again, so in terms of data analyst uh, for a supply chain, one is of course understanding that supply chain element that you're focusing on. So you need to understand two key things. So one is what we call SNOP process, sales and operation planning process. So you need to understand your sales and operation planning process. So how does the demand get generated, and then based on demand, where would those demand inputs come from, and then based on that, how are you going to plan your operations? So whether it's like what data needs to go to the manufacturing unit, factories, inventory, warehouses, and then taking it a bit step further, like to the right supplier. So what quantities or what is needs to perform. So you need to understand that SNOP process a bit if you want to become a supply chain data analyst. And then of course, like most of the technical skills that are required to do so. And in case you know some of the software that I spoke about, like LlamaSoft or JDA or Kinaxis, so then again, like all those tools, if you've got understanding of those tools plus your generic data analytics plus your process and your industry knowledge, then I think these are the right skill sets that companies need to hire a supply chain data analyst. So there was a question on how can machine learning be applied in supply chain. So I'll talk about a few cases. So one of the ways I'll talk about is uh, basically on when I spoke about spend analytics. So in spend analytics, a lot of spend that needs to be categorized or like segmented. It's done using machine learning algorithms. So where basically you would uh, you would create a training data set, and through that training data set, you can match similar entries or row items to those similar categories or segments. So that's one example of machine learning used in supply chain. Similarly, the other examples could be like performing like a quick diagnostics exercise to understand uh, and segment data or like transform data. These are like very common areas where machine learning is being used, or like generating some patterns around that. There's another question, real world examples where you have used third party data sources. So just a quick example. So the risk monitoring solution that I spoke about, so that uses aggregation of data from third party sources. So it could be your supplier's financial information from a source called DNB, Dun& Bradstreet, or it could be your news, which gets aggregated from LexisNexis type of sources. So those are some examples. I don't know about, there's another question from Prithvi on webinar being recorded, so I'm not really sure about that. So there's a question from Prithviraj on, can you elaborate the use of data analytics for blockchain? Well, again, so like this is something like which I've just read about and like heard about. So, but I'm sure like there are some very clear applications in blockchain. So first, like blockchain, what blockchain gives you is gives you transparency on the on your supply chain, right? And that transparency would be like those different data sources, data that you would generate across the supply chain. So I think if you use that data, you can easily uh, figure out, like you can use blockchain to basically give direct visibility to your end-to-end supply chain, basically. So currently, where like you're modeling each and every element of a supply chain um, at different places, and like you need to perform one exercise differently and repeat the same across elements. In blockchain, it's like it's already there, so you don't need to worry about doing the same exercise. So it's already mapped to your tier 2, tier 3 suppliers, and then what data gets recorded, it's just about getting access to that data and then performing analytics on that. So I think that's one of the very cool features for blockchain, because that transparency is already there. You don't need to create it from scratch. Is supply chain a domain that analytics professionals would find challenging? This question is from Joseph. So, so they will only find it challenging if they do not understand the business issue or the problem in hand. So if you understand the scope of supply chain, what questions you're going to solve, then I think it's fine. So hence, like I said, like understanding the business issue is very important, and not always think from a analytics professional hat or a technical professional hat. So there's a question from Ajay uh, on between finance domain and supply chain domain. Well, I mean, I'm not saying that supply chain has a huge potential, as more potential than finance analytics. I mean, both have different their pros and cons. And like in terms of, so like in financial or like banking, the analytics requirement, like in terms of technical, so the knowledge and models tend to be more complex and technical in nature. So you need more knowledge on your statistical techniques or your quantitative techniques that you need to apply to those models. Whereas in supply chain, based on my experience so far, at least 60 to 70% of your business questions can be answered through descriptive analytics or basic predictive models, or very basic optimization techniques. So it's not very complex. So if you've got a stronger technical skills in terms of statistics and quantitative uh, techniques, then I would suggest that finance analytics or financial analytics would be the right area. And then if you've got like a more broader experience area, then of course supply chain would be a good area to investigate. So there's another question from Paras. Based on your experience, which segment of the 5 components to supply chain has the highest traction in terms of analytics, applicability, demand from the companies? So I would suggest that in supply chain, the most traction is on 2 things. So it's not within elements, because most of these elements are quite mature in nature. So there are a lot of self-service tools available to run the analytics. But the real traction is basically people who can build data warehouses, build data lakes, who can integrate different data sources, etc. So that's the key skill area I think in supply chain, where like there is a lot of traction and people are needed. So like once you build that uh, database, then like, and the second is like visualizing it. So I think visualization and data management are the 2 key skill set where you can see a lot of traction. Uh, So again, so I've got some questions and the requesters have left, so I'm not taking those in the interest of time. I'll go ahead uh, to what other questions I have. There's a question from Varun on the sources that they can learn about MicroStrategy or Tableau. So, I mean, those are like technical tools, so I wouldn't really know where exactly you can get those specific inputs on, because I've used Tableau, but I don't know much about MicroStrategy except the fact that how it can be deployed on a project. So there's a question from Mahesh Reddy on, can you suggest me a best tool focused on supply chain? Well, there are a lot of tools, so it depends on what element are you focusing on. So for example, if it's sourcing, then in sourcing, there is Ariba, there is Coupa that does end-to-end sourcing activity. But if it's planning, then within planning, you've got Kinaxis that does it. Uh, so there's a question from Paris again on typically what is the client looking for when it comes to supply chain analytics, defining the problem or solving the problem, coming up with insight from data dumps they provide to the vendors. I think from the client perspective, the client doesn't think like that. So for the client, what is important is that, hey, if I spend $1 million on a analytics project, what savings can you generate for me, right? What value would you give me? So that's what they are more bothered about as compared to like what insights or what value add we are able to provide. So it's about that. So like if you look at a problem, so the problem a client would come to you would say that, I don't know where I'm spending my money on. Can you give me that visibility? So that's what they'll come up with, and then it's up to us to understand. Okay, fine. How do we create that visibility? Where do we tap the right sources? What tools, the technologies need to be used, etc. There's a question from uh, there's a question on supplier performance. Once again, I think I missed some questions in between. So there's a question from Sandhya on what do you think is the best way for a business analytics to start his career? Well, I think there are a lot of resources out there in terms of a lot of articles that can talk to you about that in terms of the right career path. From my understanding, uh, for a business and to start a career, so I mean, it's important to understand what kind of company do you want to join in and what role do you want to play in business analytics. So whether you want to be a user of business analytics, so because it's going to be a user of business analytics, then there is like a different type of companies that you want to target, and you won't be building a lot, doing a lot of analytics work, but you will be using it to answer certain queries. So that's one question that you need to check with yourself. And the second is like whether if you want to be a doer of business analytics, then what are those elements within analytics that you want to excel at, whether it's data management, whether it's towards the quant side, or whether it's everything. And accordingly, like you can like start applying to different companies. So it could be those analytics companies, um, professional services companies, consulting firms, or like a lot of IT companies now have their own in-house analytics departments. So accordingly, you could take that call. There's a question from Dilip Kumar on what is supplier performance. Supplier performance is basically a lot of companies have a lot of supply data. Within those supply data, they track certain parameters or KPIs, etc. So what analytics help is that it visualizes those performance indicators in a better manner so that clients get an idea which supplier is performing better in terms of those criteria that have been set. So that's what supplier performance is, just tracking those suppliers in terms of certain key performance indicators. There's a question from Raghav Nair on what is SKU rationalization and what is material variance analysis. So again, so many of these terms are quite jargonized, but I'll give you like a little meaning of these. So material variance analysis is basically understanding what impact, I mean, in terms of predicting the future cost of your product. That's what material variances is. So once you've got bill of materials across different sources, so you'll know to manufacture a particular product, what components do you require. So just forecasting those prices based on certain indicators and then figuring it out. So I've got like one more question. So what I can do is, sorry, I've got 1 minute left for the webinar. In the interest of time, what you can do is you have my email addresses. So please, you can just reach out to me directly for if you've got any questions, or you can send an email to Saurabh or Anoop, and then they can get back to me if you've got any questions which I've not been able to answer. Well, I think we've run out of time. So thank you so much for joining. I know it's a Monday afternoon for you guys, and there's a whole week ahead of you. Thanks a lot for joining. And if you've got any questions, you can just reach out to me. Thanks a lot.